On Press Perspective today, we walk through President Lee Jae Myung's recent diplomatic gains in the UAE that reportedly include $35 billion in investments, of which $15 billion are for the defense industry. You stay with us.
Gas and oil, because after the Ukraine war, at least in Europe, there's been a lot of this price increase of gas. It's become a more strategic resources than it was in the past. So it was very big energy resources. That sort of correlates with a lot of money. It's partly as a market. There's a lot of money there. You have a lot of technology and energy, technical expertise, and high-tech expertise that they can use. But I think also to try to diversify and grow your economy away from maybe your traditional markets of China and the US, it would be good, and it's kind of like a bridgeway to maybe Africa and the entire region.
Indeed, of course, which is why we have the president on a 4-nation, 10-day tour to the Middle East and Africa. That being said, Rebecca, the South Korean media has touched upon the beautiful and culturally rich reception that President Lee Jae Myung saw during his state visit to the UAE. What have been your observations on the ground, and what has been the regional response to the summit between President Lee Jae Myung and his UAE counterpart, Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan?
Well, the reception President Lee received was really extraordinary. I think beyond the traditional 21-gun salute and honor guard, the UAE Air Force's Al Fursan aerobatic team performed a spectacular display in the air, with the colors of the Korean flag over Qasr al-Watan, the presidential palace. Having witnessed numerous state visits over the last 16 years of my time living in the UAE, this level of ceremonial detail really speaks volumes. The UAE doesn't just roll out protocol, they craft narratives. And I think this cultural display, this welcoming, was really very, very significant, and I think it shows the excitement about having President Lee and the many, obviously, that we will touch upon now, the many exciting bilateral agreements that have come from this visit. The regional media response has also been really overwhelmingly positive. I think it's important to quote Sheikh Mohammed of Dubai's description of South Korea as a leading trade partner. Korea has been really crucial to the UAE business-wise. And I think it's particularly noteworthy, as Gulf media has picked up, how this is framed as a partnership of equals. These are two nations that have transformed themselves through vision and technology within a single generation. I think we need to remember, too, with the amazing flourishing right now of the UAE and the cities of Dubai and Abu Dhabi and other Emirates, that the UAE's own journey from pearl diving focus in terms of its commerce to now a big hub for retail and also to space exploration, literally in the span of just 50 years. So I think there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of fruits here for a really exciting partnership. And obviously that's what the Gulf media has picked up.
Right, and President Lee Jae Myung, for his part, Marcus, has asserted that the UAE is a major defense market, providing opportunities to countries like South Korea and many of those in Europe as well. What are your thoughts?
No, but that's obviously entirely true. I mean, there is a big rearmament going on, not just in the Middle East, but also in the entire world. You know, the amounts of arms being bought is increasing, and it's, I think, after especially the Israel-Gaza war, there's been, you know, even more spending on arms. You know, Israel attacked Qatar, which I think was a great shock for many of the Gulf countries. So I think it's entirely true that there is a big market for increasing their capabilities. Saudi Arabia has been buying F-35s from the US. So I think it's a gigantic market for the entire world. I think it's, in all fairness, and maybe Rebecca can comment also, I think it's also a tricky market in the sense that there are some ethical issues in the sense of where the arms might end up. I think there's been some issues of the UAE has been involved in the war in Yemen, so at least I think for European companies, that is also some necessary how the weapons are actually used. Like the last end of use, can it be re-exported? Can it be sold to Sudan? I think those, at least for European companies, are also crucial to know that it actually goes to just the UAE and not being re-exported into maybe civil wars where you can't control it. So I think it's a difficult market also in a little bit of sense.
All right, this is also an impromptu question, Marcus, but with regard to defense spending, what can you tell us about the spending put aside by Denmark?
Well, Denmark has almost tripled its defense budgets in the last years. We spent very little after the Cold War, so it went down to like just over 1.3% of the GDP. And now, as with the other NATO countries, it's increasing to 5% in recent years. So we've been, the Prime Minister literally said that the government should just buy. So we've been buying like crazy. So, which is also, again, driving prices, but also driving innovation. Especially in drones and aerial warfare. And also for Denmark, the Arctic warfare has been a big issue because, as you may know, Greenland is part of Denmark and it's become a little bit of a hot button since Donald Trump came to office.
Right. Rebecca, South Korea and the UAE, meanwhile, signed 7 MOUs, if I'm not mistaken, related to the high-tech industry. This being said, what has been the local media coverage, of course, there, about South Korea's strengths in advanced technology?
Again, local media has been particularly enthusiastic about the AI infrastructure projects, which has been valued at $20 billion, including South Korea's joining the UAE's Stargate project for hyperscale AI data centers. What's fascinating from my vantage point is how, regional media, Gulf media, positions South Korea's technological prowess, not just as hardware expertise, but as a model for rapid development that maintains cultural identity. There's been a lot of hype. I mean, not just hype. There's a lot on the ground about AI data centers and real focus on making this country even more AI receptive, with specialists from leading firms around the world coming here. And I think that this is a really important moment that obviously is also key and in agreement to South Korea's technological aims as well. Local coverage has emphasized the complementary strengths, Korea's manufacturing excellence that coincides with the UAE's ambition to become a regional AI hub. And I think there's also genuine excitement about the knowledge transfer aspect, particularly in semiconductors and AI governance. I think both nations are developing solutions through AI for shared challenges like water scarcity, which is an issue in this region, and sustainable energy. So I see the regional receptivity to the visit and to to obviously the high-tech industry, what will happen on the ground is very positive.
Beyond the high-tech industry, Rebecca, there's also quite a bit of excitement here in South Korea about the establishment of a UAE K-city, which was included, of course, in their joint declaration. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular endeavor and its broader implications for cooperation between South Korea and the UAE going forward?
Yeah, I think that the K-City, again, has been really a key. Again, there's a cultural alignment of the K-City. I think what's really key here is in both there's a top-down approach. Korea, Arab nations see in Korea a real kindred spirit. So I think that this developing K-City as a regional hub for Korean food and culture and arts, I think this is really in alignment to the UAE's wider strategy to become, there's a real focus on creative economy. As someone who's been focusing on creative economy over the last close to 2 decades here, really bolstering culture, art, tourism is a way to move to also diversify from hydrocarbons, which a lot of Gulf nations have been aiming to do, and to really push into something that is focused on cultural identity, art and culture, but also that builds cultural dialogue and diplomacy. And I think that the K-City is very much an example of this. And really exciting as a way to, not only bridge or build creative infrastructure, but also to build cultural dialogue between the two nations.
Right. And speaking about culture, Marcus, this is also an impromptu question. Has there been, do you believe, a greater interest in Korean culture in Denmark in recent years?
Much greater. I think the last 5 years has, it's gone through the roof, both in terms of K-pop, Squid Game, Korean food. I think there's been, I think it's fair to say that like 20 years ago is a very limited knowledge of Korea, and now it's become like a very trendy topic. So I think the soft power of Korea has grown a lot in recent years.
I wonder, has there been any European coverage about President Lee Jae Myung's latest diplomatic agenda over in the Middle East? Like,
there's a lot of interest in Korea, but I think there's very little, in all fairness. I mean, it's not due to the fact that it's not important. It's just due to there are so many international agendas. Trump takes out a lot of international coverage space. Ukraine war is a very big issue in Europe. There was just a peace plan agreed on in the Security Council for Gaza, which has also been a very big issue for the European countries. And then there's the Epstein case. So I mean, the sort of the time for international news, it's just difficult to find spaces for everything. And I think the rearmament in general is a very big case. There's a lot of interest in who sells weapons to the Middle East and what the weapons are being used for. But the specific visit of the South Korean president hasn't been covered that much. So it's more part of a general trend, which is there's a lot of coverage of how things go in the Gulf because of the money, because of the oil, because of the resources, and the general rearmament issue.
I wonder, has North Korea's perhaps participation in the war in Ukraine raised greater interest in Europe, Denmark, with regard to tensions on the Korean peninsula over North Korea's nuclear weapons, would you say?
I think there's been great, initially, like, curiosity and fascination with the North Korean soldiers. I think that for many, Europeans, it came as somewhat of a surprise that soldiers from many thousands kilometers away were suddenly fighting in Ukraine. So I think yes, but I think there has been like South Korea. I think there is a very big interest in North Korea because it seems like kind of like the last hermit kingdom standing. So I think in that sense, it's maybe not a big security threat for Europe, but I think it's become part of this global alliances that threaten Europe. So I think in that sense, there is a more interest in how can the European democracies and the European Union defend itself against the threats from autocracies such as North Korea that are cooperating and strengthening the Putin regime, which is seen as the greatest threat for Europe.
Right. Beyond defense, Rebecca, pundits here in South Korea say leaders in the Arab world prefer a top-down approach to state affairs. And that being said, they claim President Lee Jae Myung's diplomatic tour to the region, therefore, is quite significant. What are your thoughts with regard to President Lee Jae Myung's diplomatic gains there in the UAE?
I think the top-down approach observation is astute. President Lee's statement about cooperating for the next, quote, 100 years and making bilateral relations irreversible and permanent resonates strongly with Gulf leadership style. They think both leaders are thinking in generational terms and not just electoral cycles. And I think that's really what makes this different. President Lee's diplomatic gains are also substantial. The joint declaration on the Baraka model for nuclear energy exports to third countries transforms bilateral success into a global partnership template. So I think the defense cooperation extending to joint manufacturing combined exports, potentially worth, as you've already said, $15 billion, moves beyond the buyer-seller dynamics to a strategic industrial partnership. And this is really key. And I think it's also what's impressing regional observers is the comprehensive nature of these transactional, that's not transactional diplomacy. It's something that's about really long-term growth and institutional architecture building. I think I've noticed over the last years that there's so much focus here on legacy building, on not just short-term games, but this is something that these are agreements that are planning to last for a very long time and to benefit both nations obviously in a very strong way, both as we've talked about, culturally, but also economically and resource-wise. So the emphasis also I'd like to bring up is youth exchanges and educational aspects of these of the visit. Because I think these go beyond just government to government agreements, but they're about society to society connections that really benefit everyone. I think that there's a lot of focus on empowering the youth, and I see that also in Korea, and so this has been, I think, a focus here.
Right. Rebecca, what expectations might the Arab world, including, of course, the UAE, have with regard to their partnerships with South Korea, going beyond culture then?
I think based on my years reporting here, I really see the UAE looking at, Korea as a kindred spirit. I see both nations are modernizing rapidly. Sometimes it's hard to even remember or recall certain aspects of Dubai because the changes are so palpable, they're so quick. But I think that it's still preserving its cultural core. The cultural core to both nations is key. And I see a lot of exhibitions, but also, as you talked about K-City, there was also recently the largest ever Korean expo that took place just a few weeks ago here. Korean beauty products have long been a favorite of Emirati locals, but also residents. So there's a lot of, I'd say, cultural transfer, knowledge transfer, but also technological transfer that's building local capacity. So I feel that these partnerships are becoming stronger and stronger. And I think, for example, the last few years I've been attending the Abu Dhabi Art Fair, which next year will become the Frieze Abu Dhabi. And I've seen, quite a lot of, there's more and more Korean galleries that are participating. And like I said, there's, strong emphasis in other segments as well. But I think the other aspect which one should mention is execution. I think Gulf nations appreciate Korea's ability to deliver complex projects on time. And this is crucial in a region where vision documents have specific target dates. I mean, there's Saudi's Vision 2030, there's the UAE's 2071. I see that, there's a lot of respect for that. But the broader expectation is that Korea understands the urgency of the economic transformation here in a post-oil world. This focus on, weaning off hydrocarbons, but through these very crucial diplomatic, economic trade relations that touch on all sectors of society. So I feel that, this is really a chance for Korea and the UAE to be partners for, the long term and to really grow in many different segments.
Right, by putting, of course, their words into action. Marcus, President Lee Jae Myung is poised to attend the Group of 20 summit this year, taking place in South Africa this coming weekend. What are the issues of interest that the European media may be keeping its eyes on?
I think the overall story that's interesting is how the meeting goes in general, because the G20, in my view, has been a challenged group. Donald Trump and the US is boycotting the meeting. Russia's leaders are not attending. China's leaders are not attending. Argentina's leaders not attending. So, and at the same time, South Africa and the US have a very troubled relationship, and still they have to hand over the chairmanship to the United States, which will take over next time. So I think more than any specific issue, as I understand it, there's not even certain there will be any joint statement at the end of the meeting. So I think it'll more be like the atmosphere. Will the group survive or I'm fairly certain it's going to survive, but will it be able to have an effective role going forward, or is it like going into hibernation for a while, at least while the Trump administration stays in power? And I think that's the general story that's interesting. Then there might be bilateral meetings, which could be interesting, but it's difficult to predict exactly what will come out of it concretely. So I think that's the main story. Will G20 play a role going forward, or will it slowly dwindle?
I suppose we'll find out once the weekend is over then. Marcus, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thanks for inviting me.
And Rebecca over in the UAE, thank you so much for making time to join us live.
Thank you very much.
Right, on that note, we end Thursday's edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow with more panel discussions, so do join us then.